Okay, here we go again. Welcome to the program. This is the Otherppl Show. I'm Brad Listi. This is my podcast. Welcome to it. Hope you're good wherever you happen to be. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. So I have a great episode for you today. It's a timely episode. It is seasonally appropriate. My guest is Lily Meyer, and her new novel is called The End of Romance. It's available from Viking. And The End of Romance is about a woman named Sylvie Broder. She is the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. And we meet her and we follow her through her young adulthood. Into her adulthood, she escapes a bruising marriage. She develops a personal philosophy that posits that human happiness is only possible through the eradication of all romance. But then Sylvie finds someone who might end up changing her life forever. So, it's almost Valentine's Day. It's coming up. Love it or hate it. I figure this is a great book and a great conversation for this week. It's a very smart, thinky book on romance and intimacy and all that stuff entails. So stay tuned. I'm going to be talking with Lily Meyer about The End of Romance in just a couple of minutes. Today's episode is brought to you by Abrams Books, publisher of He's the Devil by Toby Coventry. It's his debut novel, an exhilarating, darkly comic debut about a do-gooder whose world is turned inside out when his new roommate, who might be possessed by the devil, moves in. This is a comic novel about the roommate generation, a literary thriller that explores possession and obsession, friendship, and betrayal. Again, it's called He's the Devil, the debut novel by Toby Coventry, available from Abrams Books. I also want to give a plug to Deep Dive. Deep Dive is a learning platform that creates in-depth audio courses for writers. Check it out at deepdive.audio. You can stream these courses online or, better yet, via the Deep Dive app, including the flagship course, How to Write a Novel, which consists of more than 50 hours of insight, inspiration, and instruction from nearly 4 dozen of today's most celebrated contemporary authors, including Emily St. John Mandel, Melissa Broder, Stephen Graham Jones, Jonathan Evison, Kimberly King Parsons, Wahini Vara, Poor Chistak, Poor Vivi Ganeshananthan, Madeline Lucas. Who else? Tiffany Clark Harrison. It's an all-star lineup. Check it out at deepdive.audio. All right, so my guest, once again, is Lily Meyer, author of a new novel called The End of Romance, out there now from Viking Press. Lily Meyer is a translator, a critic, and she is also the author of a debut novel called Short War. She is a contributing writer at The Atlantic, and her stories and translations can be found in a number of publications, including The Dial, The Drift, The Sewanee Review, The Southern Review, and her essays and criticism appear in a variety of outlets, including Bookforum, The New Yorker, and The New York Times Book Review. A great conversation with Lily about love, romance, intimacy, what it all means, what it doesn't mean, as we approach Valentine's Day. All right? Okay, let's do this. Here I am with Lily Meyer, and again, her new novel is called The End of Romance.
So when I began The End of Romance, I thought that it was going to be a beat-by-beat retelling of this Isaac Bashevis Singer novel, Enemies: A Love Story. And Enemies: A Love Story is about a guy named Herman Broder who survives the Holocaust. He believes that his wife is dead, killed by the Nazis. He marries the Polish Gentile woman who hid him, emigrates to New York with her, discovers that he does not want to be married to her at all, starts an affair with an Orthodox Jewish woman named Masha. He's going back and forth between them when his first wife turns up in New York, not dead, and wants to still be married to him. And Herman thinks, okay, well, history's over. We have lived through something so awful that history is done. Nothing I do matters. I don't see why I shouldn't try to have 3 wives. And he tries. It's really funny. It goes really badly. It gets really dark. And I picked this novel up out of a little free library. No real reason other than being interested in Singer. It's not one of his more famous works. And I thought it was just the freakiest thing I had ever read. It was hilarious. The engagement with history and philosophy was both very deep and done lightly. And for a book written many decades ago, set even more decades ago, it has pretty nuts sex scenes. They're not super graphic, but they are very particular and really weird. There's a long one where Herman and Masha spend a whole night eating snacks, making up stories about themselves if they had been resisting Hitler together, and having sex all simultaneously, not alternating those 3 things. And I was just so struck by the book and so surprised by it that I got jealous of it. I wanted people to read it, but I also wanted it to be mine. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to rewrite this somehow. I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to rewrite it. I'm going to make it contemporary, and I'm going to gender flip it. So I had this idea that I was going to write a book about a woman with 3 husbands who somehow believed that she was living through the end of history. That idea just kind of cooked in my head for a couple of years while I worked on my first novel, Short War. At some point, I realized, okay, the end of history is debunked. I don't think there's a contemporary story of the end of history for me to tell. But there is a way to engage with Me Too that makes it, there's a way to see Me Too as an end of romance, or to have it take me to the idea of the end of romance, the end of romantic history for straight women. And by then I was skeptical of Me Too. I wanted to engage with it. I wanted to think about where romance was going for straight women, really. And those ideas swirling together turned into the end of romance, which diverges radically from Singer's plot. It is not the retelling I imagined, but that's the origin. That is where I got the structure of 1 woman, 3 men. And that's where I got this idea of a person who believes she's lived beyond the end of something.
Okay, so you said you were skeptical of Me Too. I mean, that's kind of the context that you were looking at things through in terms of why a woman would think she was living through the end of romance. As you were talking, I got to say, I was thinking, I don't think you really have to hard sell most of us on the fact that or the idea that we might be living through the end of history. It certainly feels like it's all around us. But when it comes to Me Too, which, forgive me for not knowing the exact place and time, the last several years are such a blur. Wasn't it 5 years ago? More than that.
Me Too now is 7-8 years ago.
And you felt skeptical of it at the time, or did that skepticism sort of materialize as it matured?
I always felt skeptical, even as I felt very moved by it and very supportive of it. And yet I was concerned from the very beginning that the narratives of Me Too were placing a lot of pressure on women to be victims, really demanding that women perform victimhood or embody victimhood to get public sympathy. And that just always worried me. I was really concerned by the idea that public sympathy would be the thing that women needed to be protected or to be free. I care a lot about privacy, about the right to privacy. My political formation, to use a not very stylish term, came from being very pro-choice and being in escort at clinics to get women past protesters when I was young, when I was in early high school. And I think from that, I took just a very intense sense of defensiveness towards women's right to keep things private, towards everyone's right to keep things private. And I think I brought that influenced how I saw Me Too. And then as time went on, as I think many people have, began to question what concrete changes did this movement make in average women's lives? How much has this changed anything for an average woman in her workplace, in her dating life? I think for some people there have been real and concrete changes, and that's wonderful, but I have not seen as much as I would have hoped.
So that's very well said. I've had similar feelings, and I've had conversations on this show with women writers who, going through the submission process for a novel, this was, a few years ago, felt market pressure to write victim narratives or to present their story in a more like victim-y light, if I can put it that way. And they, at least I'm thinking of one in particular, resisted that and was like, wait a minute. So it wasn't just like social pressure. There were also like market forces that were saying like, this is what the public wants, I guess. I guess it was just publishers responding to what they were seeing on social and in the media.
Yeah, I certainly saw that as a critic. I've been a working book critic for 11 years now, and I saw the post-Me Too trend towards victim narratives, and I didn't like it one bit. It seems to me that there's a way the victim narrative can really play into the ancient Madonna whore dynamic. And I don't see why a woman shouldn't get to be a whore, honestly.
Yeah, I feel it too. I'm not a critic, but I do this show. And so I'm reading a lot of contemporary fiction and a lot of books by women. I think majority books by women, just because that seems to be the majority of what gets published in literary fiction, or that's where the majority of the readers are, or maybe I just like books by women. But I read a lot of it, and I have noticed, if I'm being candid, that there are so many victim narratives being published. And I feel like on a creative level, like as a reader and as somebody who's interested in what people are writing today, I don't like it when I find things predictable. But there is some aspect of contemporary fiction where I'm like, okay, so here it is. I can kind of feel, I've gotten to the point where I can kind of feel it coming. I'd like to be more surprised, I guess, just as a reader, and to not feel that thing kind of happening over and over and over again. On the other hand, these stories are real and they're depressingly common, and it makes emotional sense that women would want to process them in fiction and bring them to light. And so I kind of tell myself as a dude that I have to be patient with these stories. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but it's complicated. And your book is all about the complexity, not only of the Me Too of it all, but just the complexity of romance and intimate relationships. And in tandem with what I just said, I want to repeat something that I've said on this show more than once, I think, in recent months, which is that I'm hungry. I feel like I'm hungry, and I feel like there is a broader hunger for romantic narratives. Not for like kind of pulpy romance novels, though there is obviously a huge market for that. I'm talking about like literary romance, kind of like the upmarket romantic storytelling that you're doing, and that I guess like a Sally Rooney might qualify. It's kind of like that space. I feel like there's lots of people, because maybe the world is so depressing. They want, there's so much, what is it? It's like, is it Thanatos and Eros? People want love stories. They want to read about people falling in love and having sex and, and maybe breaking up or, having complications. But it just feels like maybe like a pendulum swing or some kind of natural and correct response to the hell of the world as presently constituted. I'm curious to know if you feel similarly, and if that was part of the impetus for you.
Oh, huge part, huge. I felt extremely hungry for good literary love stories. And honestly, especially for good straight literary love stories, because there are fantastic queer ones being written. And that's been true for decades, but lately there are just amazing ones. And I love to read them. But I'm also a straight woman, and I am a literary reader and a literary writer. And I want to read a complicated, tangly literary love story where a woman has good sex with a man. And other than Sally Rooney, I wasn't seeing much of that when I wrote The End of Romance. And I was absolutely trying to write into that gap.
Yeah. I mean, this book, just to give listeners who have not yet had a chance to read some context, is about a woman named Sylvie Broder, who is the product of some kind of straight-laced, rule-following parents and a fairly comfortable upbringing. And she's a woman who was very influenced by her grandparents, who were kind of a counterpoint to her more dour parents, it seems like. Like her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and they were just determined to sort of live it up and have a joyous existence as a way of kind of giving the middle finger to the Nazis and the people who had tried to kind of snuff them out. And so they really influenced her thinking, and she ends up falling for her high school sweetheart, marrying him, and he turns out to be the closest approximation in your novel, I think, to like the stereotypical bad dude, like a guy who is just kind of like a hetero mess and abusive and just like the bad guy that I've seen so many times in contemporary fiction in recent years. But she ends up leaving him and falling for another guy named Robbie, who is passive and sweet and kind to her, and who gives her a lot of space to sort of ruminate and take this unorthodox philosophical approach to romance. Like he's the perfect guy for that. He's a guy that not a lot of guys that I know would likely be. And then the third guy is a guy named Aby, who is emotive, family-oriented, super sweet, passionate, smart, and maybe the more traditional, like romantic lead figure. So that's the three. She's sort of juggling these guys and trying to make sense of what she thinks and how she feels. And it's really messy and really interesting, and is a very nice like redress to like more oversimplified romantic narratives that often appear, I think, in like genre romance novels or in movie theaters, like rom-com, like typical rom-coms. Like I was thinking of When Harry Met Sally, which I think would qualify, at least for a person of my generation, as a kind of upmarket rom-com, like a thinky rom-com. I feel like your novel is like 50 times as thinky as that.
Honored. The novel does have a Nora Ephron epigraph, I will say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of, and by the way, it's a movie. It's harder to do in a movie. Trying to make like pop art and put something in the movie theater that's going to reach the masses or whatever. And I just think that the medium of a novel is a place where you can stretch out and really think things through. It just gives you more space for that kind of thing. But I've been seeing, in addition to like a lot of Me Too type narratives by women writers in recent years, I've also been seeing a lot of divorce memoirs and divorce novels. I mean, I think there have been like entire think pieces written on this spate.
I wrote
narratives.
one.
You did?
I did.
The first novel?
No. I wrote a think piece about bad. Well, I wrote a review of a bad divorce memoir that was a little bit of a think piece about bad divorce memoirs.
Okay, so I want to confess something to you, and I hope I don't step in it. This feels like a conversation where I could easily do so, so don't give me an out. If I say something stupid, you're welcome to just like tell me. But when it comes to divorce narratives and women sort of being like, I'm done with men, or I'm done with monogamy, or I'm done with romance. And so I'll see this sometimes. I'll see like somebody being like, I'm divorced. I left that asshole behind and I'm never getting married again. And I don't need a man, and so on and so forth. And I get it. Like, maybe you don't. Like, I don't know. There's room for everything. I'm not trying to stage manage somebody else's life. But this, in the social media of it all, I will see writers kind of brand themselves in this way, like really embrace the idea of being like a thought leader on this front. I don't buy it. And I feel like this is a person who's been like badly emotionally wounded. It is sort of processing it in public. And it's not that like big significant changes in one's thinking haven't been made, but I just guess I bristle a little bit at this idea that like love is unnecessary. Or I guess in my head, I'm thinking, I guarantee I can already see it. Like 5 years from now, it's going to be the memoir about how actually I fell in love with a really nice guy and just learned a lot, and I'm really into romance again. It feels like that's coming, but I could be wrong. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel very similarly, and yeah, have said so in writing as a critic. I mean, when I wrote The End of Romance, the phenomenon you're describing was happening. And relatedly, the broader phenomenon of heteropessimism was really taking off. And I'm married too. I was getting engaged, getting married as I wrote The End of Romance. So I was consciously in this optimistic place. But also, regardless of how optimistic I do or don't feel about men at a given moment, I know I live with them in the world. I have a husband, I have a father, I have a brother. I've always had a lot of male friends. Who knows? I could have a son someday. I just don't believe that any rhetoric that involves trashing men or throwing men out is useful because it's not realistic. And that's not even including the fact that a lot of women want to have sex with men, want to fall in love with men, want to have sex and not fall in love with men, but maybe fall in love accidentally, which happens to Sylvie. I don't think it's realistic not to include the possibility of love in our thinking. And I really don't think it's realistic for women to not include the possibility of men and the possibility that men could be good in our thinking. Also, if women don't have high expectations of men, and this is central to Adrienne Rich's essay about compulsory heterosexuality, which is so famous and which is part of The End of Romance. It's really on straight women to have high expectations of men because we're the ones who live with them voluntarily. And I believe that myself. Sylvie does not believe it for some of the book, believes it in a counterproductive way for some of the book when she's with Robbie, when she's deep in the grips of her theory about the end of romance. But I really did I wanted the book to be optimistic about men, about love, about romance, ultimately, because I think that's a realistic approach to the complexities of life.
Yeah. And I feel like so much of the behavior that I see online or on the page seems very deeply rooted in fear and anger, justifiable fear, justifiable anger in a lot of cases. But I don't know if that's like a good operating principle, like if it's a sustainable operating principle. Like what's going to happen if we're in this kind of posture of fear and anger towards one another, or some combination of that all the time. Like, where does that lead us, I guess, is the question. It doesn't seem like it would lead us anywhere good.
Yeah. I have written fundamentally out of anger before. My first novel, Short War, it's about U.S. involvement in and backing of the coup against Pinochet in Chile in 1973. I am very angry about that. I am very angry that I was not taught about it in high school or college and had to learn about it myself. I'm angry that it isn't a fundamental part of how Americans think about ourselves in the world. If it were, people would care a lot more that we just kidnapped the leader of Venezuela, for example. My anger about that, I found productive for writing a book because I was A, writing about the past, and B, writing about large power structures that I really can't touch. I can write at them. I can ask people to think about them differently. Them being the CIA, fundamentally. I can't do that much about the CIA. I am one writer, one novelist. That's very different from writing about contemporary love and romance, the, battle of the sexes, if you will. That's not the past in any way. That is extremely ongoing, extremely personal. When I'm writing about the present and future, and when I'm writing about on the ground life that affects me rather than a big power structure that is over me, I don't think anger is productive in that second case. In the case of writing about what's all around me and will be all around me for the rest of my life. I can feel angry. I just don't think anger is the approach that serves me, serves my work, serves my readers, I hope.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to write from anger, to write well.
I've always thought it's harder to write happiness than sadness in literature. And I think it's easy to write angry, but it's hard to pull anger off. And I wanted to do happy, so I knew I couldn't do happy and angry. That's another thing about this book.
Yeah, I think where I've struggled in the past is like trying to write funny from anger. Like you get angry about something and then you want to like mock or satirize or whatever. And like my emotional state as a human being has to cool off before I have, I guess, some level of creative control. It's like if I'm running too hot, if I'm too caught up in the emotion of feeling pissed off, it can be hard to kind of transmute that into something that's like funny and of interest to a reader. Sometimes like rage on the page just feels like a mess. But there are some people who have, I think, maybe a greater degree of control than I do.
I'm not that person, and that is why, especially as a critic, I am so grateful to my editors and revere them. When I need to be cooled off, that's when I love my editors the most. So
the book that you've written is sort of built around this idea that if straight women, I mean, Sylvie's kind of entertaining this idea. She's a philosophy person, philosophy student, getting her PhD. Is that
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she's entertaining this idea that if she is to be truly liberated, then romance has to go away. Like romance needs to be eradicated. The idea of like traditional monogamy needs to be like out the door. And she has this dynamic, like after her unhappy first relationship with her high school sweetheart that ends in a really ugly way. Though it doesn't, I guess, like legally really end. She just sort of ghosts him. She doesn't even actually get a divorce. She ends up with this like more passive guy, Robbie, from suburban Detroit, which I got to say geographically is well placed. I feel like the upper Midwest, it's like a good place to find a nice passive guy. I say this as somebody who was born in Milwaukee. But she finds him, and he kind of gives her all of this freedom to test out her theories, I guess. And he's a really interesting character to me. Like, I don't know if I know a Robbie. Maybe I do and I don't know it. Have you ever met anybody like that?
I have. I would say you could easily know a Robbie and not know it, because Robbie presents as the most normal guy. I mean, Robbie presents as a true Jewish prince. I mean, he's a corporate lawyer. He's tall. He's athletic. He's hot. He cooks. He's such a normal dream husband. And yet he chooses Sylvie, who is not in the market for a dream husband. And that, just thinking about that choice allowed me to get to the weird core of Robbie as a man who wants things he doesn't know he wants, a man who is very uncomfortable with what he wants. I mean, Robbie is a lost guy, and he wants Sylvie to find him.
And then Abby, who is a Virginian Jew, which is not like, I haven't seen a lot of Virginian Jews in contemporary lit. You know, it's kind of like there's a really interesting element to this story through his character that brings the reader into like a richer, deeper, and more complex history of Jewish American life than typically is presented. A lot of it's like New York, Philly, Hollywood, and it's post-Holocaust emigration, like fleeing Europe in the mid-20th century. But this is a guy whose roots in Virginia go back to like the early days of colonization. And I haven't seen that. I'm curious to know how you landed there with his character.
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that up, because this is a huge part of my project as a writer. I mean, far beyond the end of romance. I really care a lot about writing American Jewish fiction. I really think of myself as a Jewish writer. And it's important to me to write about American Jewish history and American Jewish identity that goes beyond. I mean, there is no writer I love and revere more than Philip Roth, but I don't need.
I got to say, I love Philip Roth too.
He is truly my king, but I don't need to write the Rothian experience, because why would I try to do what he. Well, I'm saying this. I did want this book to be my Portnoy's complaint. So it's not that I'm not trying to do Roth, but in terms of the historical ways to be a Jew in America, the ways that being a Jew in America manifests in class, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something else. Also, I wanted to write about my own Jewish background, which I think goes to some more. It gets me to some more fraught parts of being Jewish. And Robbie is part of that too. Robbie is from a Midwestern German Jewish family. They've been in the country for a while. They fully celebrate Christmas. They are super, super assimilated. All of that is true in my family. I am constantly explaining to people why my non-Jewish husband and I do Christmas with my Jewish family. Yeah. The assimilation in my family is unsettling and confusing and very American. I wanted to write about that. Also, there is a part of my family that has lived in Richmond, Virginia. Not anymore, but they lived in Richmond, Virginia for generations. They emigrated before the Civil War. This is what I gave to Abby. So Abby's family didn't come. They weren't around for the Revolution. They would have come in like 1820 something, 1830 something. And some of them fought in the Civil War for the Confederacy. And that's true of my family too, which for a long time I experienced as, a shame that I carried. I was embarrassed about it. If you had told me when I was 18 that I would go on a podcast and talk about it, I would have said, what's a podcast? But also I would have said, you are simply insane. I would never do that. And here I am. I've written about it for LitHub. I've written about it for the New Republic. I think it's very important to think and talk about because there is a narrative in the contemporary American Jewish world that says, well, first of all, there's a Zionist narrative that says Jews aren't really Americans, Jews belong in Israel, Israel keeps Jews safe. I think that's all fake. I think that's all propaganda. I think I'm an American. No other country is my country. No other country has a claim on me. And the fact that my ancestors participated in the worst American sin means that I have a real obligation to this country. I have an obligation to see myself as American and to try to make the United States better. AB thinks all that too. At the same time, there's another strain in contemporary Jewish discourse that says Jews have always been victimized. We are the victims of history. We must put ourselves on the side of the oppressed whenever possible because we too are the oppressed. Is that true? Yeah. But also, as an ethnic immigrant group, Jews have done very well in America. Most of us benefit from full white privilege. A lot of Jews are rich. A lot of Jews are connected. A lot of Jews are powerful. And to not acknowledge that and try to use those connections and that power for good, I think is silly. And I think in order for that to happen, Jewish writers, well, Jews need to be able to talk publicly about our privilege, which is all a very long way of saying, I write about these fancy, well-off Jews because that's real. That's an accurate portrayal of a Jewish experience in this country, as writing about AB's Confederate ancestry is an accurate portrayal of a Jewish experience in this country. And for the record, Lehman Brothers was founded by basically Confederate Jews. So there's a lot of linkage between Southern pre-Civil War Jewry and Jews in positions of power now or recently.
Something I found interesting about your novel when it comes to the exploration of Jewishness is the fact that Sylvie comes from these kind of straight-laced parents, and the grandparents are the ones who are fun. I feel like the grandparents who survived the Holocaust in most stories would be the ones who are like, for understandably, more dour and maybe more fatalistic or something. And that generationally, the parents would be the ones who were more liberated. But that's not the case. Do I have it wrong? Is that a common thing?
I certainly didn't want to write the grandparents as victims. They are people who were victimized, yeah, horribly, but they are extraordinarily averse to living as victims. And I think Sylvie really internalizes that. A lot of the novel is Sylvie struggling with the question of whether she was Jonah's victim, and B, years after she left him, is she still his victim? Does she have to be, but also can she not be? I mean, she's really wrangling with that question, which is a very complicated one. And I wanted the grandparents to really give her grounding in the idea that to have been victimized is not the same as carrying the identity of victim or choosing the identity of victim. And I will say also, the Holocaust survivor who I knew the best in my life was a very good friend of my grandparents, and he was a happy guy. And his wife, who is one of my role models and heroes to this day, she was born in the US. She is not a survivor. She is just simply a force. They were a really joyful pair, and I absorbed that as a little kid, being around them in these big groups of people. And that I was thinking about that. I was thinking about them.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by such people. I got to believe there's some genetic predisposition to like a kind of like happy mind state and exuberance. I mean, some of it's nature and some of it's nurture. But something I've noticed, and this could be just me, connecting dots in a way that isn't rooted in reality. But it seems like it would be true that survivors of the Holocaust, in addition to maybe having this kind of fierce joy, as a response, also often live long lives. Is that true? Is there evidence for that? Or I just feel like I'm like, oh, there's another person who survived the Holocaust who lived to be like 107. And I guess like the logic that I'm following in my brain is like, yeah, if I survived the Holocaust, made it through that, I would feel sort of not invincible, but you know what I'm saying? There would be a strength and maybe like a will to live or something that would carry me.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I know a survivor who's 104, but I can't give you any data.
Yeah. It's just something I'm always paying attention. It doesn't matter who it is. Somebody lives to be 107. I'm like, how do they do it? But it doesn't seem like there's one way.
I myself would prefer not to live to 107, but that's just me.
What's your age?
Right now? Or when
Yeah. What are you looking, what's your target for when you want to check out?
I don't know, but under 100, a century seems like too long.
Yeah, I get that. I have a disabled child. So like in my head, I'm like, I got to stick around. I have like this almost like maniacal devotion to longevity because of that, because I'm like, who's going to care for him? So I've got to do it if I can. I mean, knock on wood.
Yeah.
But that is a long time. And it's just like the quality of life is such an issue. You don't want to be like, if you're 107 and you still have your wits about you, and obviously you're going to be physically diminished, but if you can still crack a joke and enjoy life and maybe go for a walk, do some light gardening. I mean, there's a guy, I say this, I live in Los Angeles and I hike pretty much every morning. Like speaking of my like maniacal commitment to longevity projects or whatever. But there's a guy who is up in the mountains. I don't see him as much as I used to. I think he just celebrated his 102nd birthday.
Wow.
And he hikes. And he's the happiest. Like he's like central casting, sweetest old 102-year-old guy, kind of philosophical, but wears it lightly and has a smile on his face, plays the harmonica while he hikes. I mean, you're just like, this is it. How did this guy, I mean, he's just so positive and beloved. There's lots of people up there who kind of celebrate his birthday every year, but I'm looking at him and I'm like, this is it. I mean, this guy is aging so beautifully. He doesn't look 102. And to be able to go for any kind of hike in a mountain at that age is extraordinary. Yeah.
Wow. If I could be him, I would accept.
Likewise. That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah. But so there's a lot of like philosophical underpinnings, in this novel, as I've been saying. Like, this is a really thinky book that doesn't take easy outs. It's not looking for like the quick fixes or the simple solutions. It's really trying to kind of lean into the complexity of these issues and the questions raised by them and the questions that are kind of tormenting Sylvie about her relationship to romance. And I'm curious to know about your philosophical interests and explorations as a novelist. Like, was this something that you already kind of had packed away in your head, or was it something that you engaged with as a reader as a way to sort of write this book with some orientation and intelligence?
I think both. I've always had an orientation towards philosophy, which I was raised to have. This is not organic. First of all, Sylvie's relationship with her grandfather, which spawns her own tendency to philosophize, comes from my relationship with my grandfather, who was debating politics with me when I was 8. My dad also studied political philosophy and religion, really wanted to share that with me, was talking to me about philosophy, giving me works of philosophy to read when I was, I think little. And that is one of the biggest pieces of luck in my life, I think, that I was just absolutely trained to think. And so I do think in that way. I'm attracted to theorizing. I'm attracted to philosophizing. I didn't major in philosophy or religion in college, but I took classes in both. I loved them. And So when I started writing The End of Romance, I had read a lot of philosophy. I had my favorites. I knew there was going to be some Kierkegaard because I love Kierkegaard, for example. But also I really needed to give myself a grounding in feminist theory, in queer theory, in more contemporary stuff. So I read a lot. I read very intentionally as research for the book. I didn't start writing until I'd almost outlined Sylvie's dissertation. I mean, I had really come up with the theory that she designs and that she believes. And I came up with it knowing that I didn't believe it, knowing, okay, some parts of this should be right. Some parts of it should be sort of kooky but borderline. Some parts should be totally wrong and ill-advised. I designed it that way, but I really did research it all. I should also say, for any actual philosophy grad students, Sylvie's dissertation simply would not fly in a real philosophy department. If anything, she would have to be some sort of like theory-ish English major, but I wanted her to be in a philosophy department, and I'm a novelist, so I can.
Yeah, I like that aspect of the book, and it also illuminates the ways in which I feel like philosophy can get out of hand. Like a person's philosophizing and reliance on philosophy as a way to, like you say, kind of create one's own personal approach to life and to relationships, and to maybe like build intellectual structures of justification, if that's a way to put it. I'm not a super well-read person in that space. I've done a little bit of it. I can often find it frustrating because I'm like, well, where does this leave me? Like I'm spinning and I'm stimulated and it's making me think. I guess you got to sort of put it together yourself at a certain point. But I do feel like it's a space where somebody who's brainy and interested in this stuff could just kind of spin forever, or could create like an elaborate architecture for just about any like life path or orientation to the world. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. And that's absolutely what Sylvie does. She creates a very elaborate architecture for herself, and then it all falls down. I mean, I would say that The End of Romance is friendly to theorizing and hostile to theories. And I would say the same thing about myself.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. It's like a good way to like it's good to think. Obviously, it's like good to think things through. And I guess the question that I have in my mind when I'm doing this is like, okay, so at what point does the rubber meet the road? Like at what point do we take like a predilection for theorizing and kind of marry it with practical application? And it doesn't mean, I guess, that you have to hit some sort of like finish line or come up with some final answer on stuff. It's always going to be an evolving process. But at some point, you want to be able to apply this stuff to your life in a way that feels useful and maybe brings you closer to some kind of deeper peace or happiness, right?
Yeah. I mean, a book that I think of as in many capacities the opposite of my book, and this was productive for me, this is not a knock, is Christine Smallwood's The Life of the Mind. And I used to joke that I was going to call The End of Romance The Life of the Body, because a problem with theorizing too much is that theories are great for your head, but we live in our bodies too, and our bodies have their own demands. For Sylvie, the demands of her body and of her heart, whatever and wherever. I mean, I know where the human heart is, but wherever your emotions are coming from, that's not the same place that your theories are coming from. And how that relates to sexual desire and to the general experience of walking around the world in a body, that's all complicated. That all is what, on the one hand, messes up theories, and on the other, I think must be respected.
Yeah, I was thinking of spirit too. I mean, I think there can be some crossover between all of these different things, but I would say like there's the thinky aspect, like the intellectualizing and theorizing. Then there's the physical aspect, like you're saying, of having a body. But then there's this like spiritual area, which, means different things to different people. But I feel like that's what Sylvie's kind of reckoning with as well. Like there's something about like falling in love and making sense of your existence and how you relate to other people that whether you're a religious person or you're not, I think you do have to reckon with the metaphysics or the spiritual or the cosmic nature of it all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in a totally secular sense, that really is what Sylvie struggles with when she struggles with having fallen in love. She can't understand love, really. She can't place it in her theories. She can't make love behave. And I think most of us can't. I wouldn't want to. That doesn't sound very interesting or fun to me.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting that you talk about how she can't make love behave and how her experience of falling in love with A.B. kind of doesn't square with her theorizing. This book, in addition to wanting to kind of lean into the complexities that so often get left out of these kinds of narratives in like the post-Me Too era or in popular culture, also made me really think about the ways in which the culture has lied to all of us about what love even is. And, I'm talking about just like love narratives, like there's the hero and then there's the damsel in distress or whatever way that it manifests in, say, like a romantic movie or a teen rom-com. Like we sort of enter the world with these loaded ideas about what it's supposed to feel like to fall in love, which really tend to be very far afield from the actual lived experience. And I think that's part of the struggle for her, in addition to the fact that her parents don't really have like a super warm relationship. I think that maybe that's the most critical piece of a person having a healthy orientation towards love and romance is having an example to model, whether it's the parents or I guess the grandparents are really the thing that's kind of Sylvie's North Star. But do you see what I'm getting at? Like this book feels like an attempt to kind of correct that piece of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier the degree to which I wrote Robbie to be a perfect husband candidate, and specifically a perfect husband candidate for someone who was raised like Sylvie, like me, in an upper class, white collar, still aspirational American Jewish environment. Robbie is exactly the guy a girl raised there is supposed to marry. A.B.'s not radically not that guy, but he's very different. He presents very differently. He's so loud. He's always, I think I cut some descriptions of how much horrible tie-dye he wears, but he's always wearing horrible tie-dye. He's just a chaotic, bouncy, prickly guy who's not going to make a ton of money ever. He's pursuing things that are not the obvious and conventional ideals. He's not physically attractive in the obvious and conventional way. He's just far enough outside the norm of the romantic lead that Sylvie would have been pushed towards to be at once safely unlike Jonah, her awful first husband. Well, I say first husband, her awful husband. Both like him enough to unsettle her, because he is still a nice Jewish boy, and unlike him enough to lull her into a false sense of security, to think, oh, this isn't the conventional path, even though A.B. maybe takes her somewhere much more conventional. I'm not sure if I'm talking about love anymore, if I'm just talking about Jews.
Well, I just think that a lot of people who end up in unhappy marriages or unhappy relationships are thwarted, at least in part, by expectations that are fueled by these kinds of silly narratives or lies perpetuated by the culture. It kind of gives them an idea of how things should be. And then the rubber meets the road and it's like, oh, well, this is how things actually are. Where's my knight in shining armor, or where's my princess, or do you know what I'm saying? And it's just a lot of relationships, I think, wither in the space between the kind of stories we're told and the lived reality of being in an intimate relationship with somebody over the long haul. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. And it's not easy for anybody. I mean, there's greater and lesser degrees. There's like the grandparents who have joy. They still fought. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody's got it locked down and perfect, but it's just really challenging. And something that I've often repeated over the years and something that I hold on to is like this Quaker idea of a relationship being, they call it like the little church. Like it is this little crucible that you're inside of, and it will reveal you to yourself in good ways and bad. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you're really in it and you're trying to make it work and you're trying to kind of do your best every day, for me anyway, there's like a spiritual aspect to it. And that's a lot of work, and it can be uncomfortable, you know, and you have to sort of be willing to reckon with yourself and see yourself honestly in ways that are unflattering. I mean, that's what a lot of intimacy is about, right? You see your partner at her best or his best or their best, and you also see them at their worst. And you kind of have to forgive each other that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the novel does not go all the way there. I mean, it does not go years and years with Sylvie and Abby or Robbie. But related to that, I think, is the importance of writing sex scenes because they are intimate and messy and usually don't happen in the ways that we're told that they will. I mean, certainly sex in life is not like sex in porn. Sex in life is also not like sex in Hollywood, where it's dark and the sheets are pulled all the way up and there's some like heavy breathing while gazing into each other's eyes and you don't really see anything that happens below the armpit. You know, none of that's realistic. At the same time, I think a lot of novels, contemporary novels, especially contemporary literary novels, especially, elide sex, and that creates this false narrative that, oh, it's not actually that important. Sex isn't a part of a relationship that you need to concentrate on, that you choose based on, you know, that's a messy thing that's off to the side. I really wanted the novel to get into it because I really don't think that's true. And I think it's a way to explore the mess and challenge of relationships without writing a novel that goes years and years and years through a relationship.
Yeah, that's well said. I got to say that I feel like the characters in your novel have really good sex a lot.
Thank you. I live to serve.
I was going to say, I was like, damn, these people know what they're doing. And then I think that what you just said is also related to what I was saying about people's expectations around love and romance, like vis-a-vis the culture and how we kind of come into adulthood with this like false set of expectations oftentimes. And I think sex is very much tied to that. I mean, you talk about how it's often elided in literary fiction, but it's not elided in porn, and it's not elided in, I guess, certain movies. And so I think people can often be thwarted in love and romance by either outsized expectations or this kind of like really twisted expectation of what sex is supposed to look like. And then there are also just issues of like, well, how does it function? I know you don't get into this in your book, but your book is all about kind of the foundation, you know, for a relationship that will hopefully carry forward, you know, many decades and kind of go the distance. But things change, and they don't change at the same pace for each partner necessarily. Like people are not always like physically in sync, like biologically, you know what I'm saying? And emotionally, who knows? But like that sort of stuff can come as a surprise to people, I think, when they get into a relationship and it goes on for a while. And I think people can sometimes feel like, I don't know, like this is fucked up, or this is a transgression, or this is somehow, like an aggression towards me, or a failure by me, or whatever it is, And so I guess I just like when those complexities are spoken to or hinted at, because I feel like, I don't know, it's a tough thing. It's like, how do you educate somebody about that stuff when they're coming of age? Maybe part of the problem is that it's like hard for parents to talk to their kids about it. And so they go to movies and they watch like When Harry Met Sally and try to like sort it out. Like so many of us are operating with like a limited playbook. So maybe, some precocious young readers can read your book and like it'll help them form their thinking. Has that occurred to you?
Oh God, precocious young readers. No, I do think that there is maybe a cultural swing now towards realistic and explicit depictions of sex. I mean, everyone is watching Heated Rivalry, which is quite explicit. And I think some of the sex on that show is idealized, but absolutely not all of it. I watched it and there were times when I was thinking like, Ilya, watch your teeth. Oh my God. And that's a realistic thought to have in a blowjob scene, to be thinking both this is so hot and like, oh my God, where are his teeth?
What is this, the hockey? This is the hockey
Yeah.
show?
This is the hockey show. And the fervor with which audiences have responded to that has made me think, okay, people are ready for more depictions of sex that are more realistic.
Well, and I think there are certainly cultures around the world that have a much more open attitude around this stuff. Some of this is just like the American prudishness of it all, and this kind of discomfort with sexuality and the body.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like the Irish don't have problems with cultural prudishness too, and Sally Rooney writes great sex scenes.
Yeah. And I think there's always, people love to, this is the thing, people love to read this stuff.
Exactly.
There's a reason why romance novels sell.
Yeah, and I looked at romance novels as craft models when I was writing The End of Romance, because, I knew I was going to write a bunch of sex scenes. I knew I didn't want them to be repetitive or boring or use the same words and phrases and constructions over and over. And so I went and read a bunch of romance novels and learned a lot from them about how to write sex.
Like good and bad, like how to write it and maybe how not to write it.
Yeah, I had a lot of strong opinions already about how to not write sex. No shade to Jonathan Franzen, but having read his novels gave me a pretty good idea about how I didn't want to write a sex scene.
Why? What was it?
I do not feel that his characters seem to enjoy being in bodies, even when they are enjoying what they're doing with their bodies.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I've read a couple of his books. I'm trying to think of like a sex scene. I have such a terrible memory. I wouldn't even be able to think of it. But, it's not an easy thing to do, to write sex well. And I think like a kind of just the facts approach where you just sort of get declarative about it and specific. I've heard that said on this show many times, You ever read Garth Greenwell?
Yeah.
He's really good at writing sex, I feel like. And is kind of like an evangelist for the kind of explicit, writing about sex and intimacy that you're talking about. I think it, I guess there's a way that it could be overdone, but I do think that it serves us well to just be honest about what it is to be a human being in a body. Everybody's fucking, right? We wouldn't all be here.
Exactly.
if that weren't the case. So like, let's just drop the ruse. It's like so ridiculous in so many ways. I have to point out that your novel is dropping right around Valentine's Day. Curious to know how you feel about Valentine's Day.
Oh, I feel neutral, I would say. But that has less to do with romance and more to do with, I don't really like what I call obligation holidays. So like until I had a kid, I did not like Halloween as an adult. I don't like New Year's. For me, if a holiday isn't I'm going to do a family tradition, I kind of don't like it and don't want it. And my family has no Valentine's Day traditions. I'll probably love it when my toddler gets big enough to be making, Valentines for school. But as an adult, I just feel like that's not my thing. That's a boring answer. I'm sorry.
No, not to me. You're speaking my language. I can't stand, most holidays, I tolerate them, it seems like at best, but I have maybe a more stridently negative view of most all of them than the average person. And I don't want to spoil people's good times. I also don't I could say this about Christmas. I can say it about Valentine's Day. These days make people feel like shit. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people, they make some people feel great. They get 100 red roses delivered to their door and, a massage and a bubble bath. Great. You're having a great day. But a lot of people are like, oh, fuck, I'm alone. I'm going to die alone. Nobody loves me, or I'm so broke, I can't afford Christmas gifts, or I don't have any family to celebrate with, or, you know what I'm saying? I always think about those people on these days, and I'm like, look, it's okay if you're in love. That's great. But maybe keep it down. Yeah. Some people out there are struggling. It's not helping, what's the point of gloating about it? I know you want to, I don't know, people in love to sing about it. I guess there's a place for that stuff, but it definitely makes other people feel the lack.
Yeah. I struggle with anything I find performative. I'm not a natural performer, and I don't especially enjoy when I feel that I'm being performed to, if I'm not, at a concert or a movie or a play. And I think that holidays like Valentine's Day, concepts of romance can involve a lot of public performance. And that's something that the novel resists, that Sylvie resists. I'm a pretty private person myself. It would not sit right with me to perform my own personal marriage as a public romance. And I think Sylvie has some of that.
Yeah. I feel like a dick sometimes, but I'm like, I don't want to hear about your anniversary on Instagram. I don't buy it. I feel like there's something performative about it, and it makes other people feel like they got to do it too. Otherwise, they're a bad spouse. I resent all of that. I'm like, no, I'm not putting this up on Instagram to try to advertise the fact that I'm happy or I'm a good partner. I don't want to be maybe my wife is secretly pining for me to do this, but I don't think so. I think she's fine with me not making a spectacle of it. And yet the world needs more love. It makes people maybe happy to see people happy. I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer about it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sylvie is extremely on your side. It's part of her theory that she thinks that every performance of love on social media is what oppresses women. I wouldn't go so far. I like to perform my love for my dog on social media because I want everyone to praise her and say how perfect she is.
Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page there. Unfettered. I believe in unfettered, public advertisement of one's pets. Yes. That's what social media is for. Everything else can just be kept private. But I really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad to be talking about all that it entails, right around this time, and to really have a substantive conversation about these things that have been on my mind and seem to be out there. So kudos to you for kind of channeling it. It feels like we're maybe picking up some of the same signals, and you took the time to really dive into it. So kudos to you. And thank you so much for talking.
Oh, thank you. This has been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be read so thoughtfully.
Okay, there we go. That was my conversation with Lily Meyer about The End of Romance, her new novel out there now from Viking Press. You can find Lily on the internet at lilyjmeyer.com. Follow her on Instagram and read her book. Read it on Valentine's Day. Just get it. Take it to a park. I don't know. Where are you going to go? Go to a cafe, sit there alone, and read The End of Romance, and have the cover facing out so everybody knows that's what you're up to on Valentine's Day. It's up to you. Again, it's called The End of Romance. It's out there now from Viking, and you can read it. Don't forget to subscribe to this program wherever you listen. Hit the subscribe button, and you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. Sign up for my newsletter at bradlisti.substack.com and support this show and the work that I do each and every week to bring it to you. You can show your support at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Join my book club, the Other People Book Club, and get an Other People t-shirt over at otherppl.com. Get yourself some deep dive writing courses over at deepdive.audio. And if you have 2 minutes and you want to do me a quick favor, please give this show a rating and write a little review if that's an option. It helps the show algorithmically, and it helps it find new listeners. Otherwise, coming up on Thursday, there should be a brand new episode of Brad and Mira for The Culture, this podcast's weekly pop culture digest. I will be joined, I think, by my millennial friend and co-host Mira Gonzalez, and we'll try to make sense of popular culture at this particular moment in history. All right? Nothing makes sense. Everything's fucked up. This is a show. The Brad and Mira show is intended to be unserious, even though we are living in very serious times. We could all use a break. Just an hour. Check it out, or I guess maybe like an hour and a half. But check it out on Thursday. Brad and Mira for The Culture.